The psychology of a child who grew up too fast. In a world that constantly celebrates youth and the promise of new beginnings, we encounter an inexplicable paradox. There are souls who were forced to grow up before they even had the chance to define themselves. They are not old, yet they carry the wariness and the deep understanding of many lifetimes. The cinematic image opens onto a dimly lit room, illuminated only by the light of a computer screen or a candle that has nearly burned down. You might see them at the park, sitting on a bench, their eyes not focused on the playing crowd, but gazing into a distant, empty space. They are not participating in the games of childhood. They are observing. Perhaps you know someone like this, or perhaps that profound, isolating understanding resides deep within yourself. Perhaps you are the one who extinguished your own innocence in exchange for a false sense of safety. They are known as the children who grew up too fast, those who bore the weight of adult responsibilities while still learning to tie their shoes. And the question that pierces the core of this experience is, why? Why does a person trade the years where they were allowed to make mistakes, allowed to be weak, to become an adult whom no one ever grants permission to rest? This is where we dive into the psychology of forced maturation. It is easy to assume that the child who grew up too fast is strong, that they are inherently responsible, independent, and admirable for their ability to solve problems without needing assistance. It is easy to assume they chose to carry the burden, chose to become the pillar, but that is not the full picture. The hidden psychological truth is much darker and more complex. What you perceive as strength is actually a defensive mechanism built from profound lack. This was not a choice, it was forced adaptation. These individuals learned that expressing weakness or personal needs was not just futile, but could also create instability, even danger, for themselves or their family system. They were trained without realizing it. You learned that silence meant safety. You became the one who never asks for anything. This leads to a psychological concept called parentification, when a child takes on the role of an adult, both emotionally and functionally, caring for parents or siblings instead of being cared for. They are not merely self-starting adults, they are parentified adults. What you see is not maturity, but a deep, profound deprivation. They don't express sadness overtly. They're not sad. Instead, they exhibit unconscious behaviors. They check the room before speaking. They hold their breath slightly when others raise their voices. These are the behaviors of someone in a state of hypervigilance, not self-control. When you grow up in an environment where safety is not a given, all your senses are pushed to their highest level, becoming a sophisticated filter constantly scanning for danger. That is why the prematurely aged child often possesses eyes that are incredibly sharp and deep, yet perpetually distracted. They are not looking at people, they are looking through them. They are searching for subtle cues of mood shifts, an unidentifiable frown, a moment of silence that stretches out too long after a question. You don't feel abandoned, but you wait until the candles burn down. This behavior is not callousness or indifference. This is survival intelligence in disguise. You developed what is called a toxic level of internal locus of control, the belief that every bad thing that happens in life is your fault, and if you just control things well enough, everything will be fine. They did not choose control. They were forced into control. This is not personal autonomy. This is a desperate attempt to regulate an unpredictable world. It is not because you are power-hungry. It is because you had to carry too much burden, too soon, to the point where control became the only breath you could trust. They are not simply quiet people. They are the ones who check the room before speaking. To truly understand why these children wear the mask of premature maturity, we must revisit the moments where the trauma didn't stem from a single large shock, but from repeated micro-traumas. These are the tiny fractures in trust and safety. It's when you ran to them with a scrape, and instead of comfort, you were met with a sigh and the instruction, "You're a big kid now. Handle it yourself." Or when you tried to express fear and were labeled as too sensitive or overreacting. These children were not overtly neglected, but they experienced emotional neglect. Their emotional needs were dismissed, leading them to a harsh and profound conclusion: my needs do not matter. This toxic belief embedded itself deep into their selfhood, forcing them to erase the need for unconditional care and love. They believed the only path to acceptance or survival was to become useful. They shifted from a state of "I need" to a state of "what can I do for you?" Parentification isn't just about doing chores. It's when you had to manage other people's emotions, becoming the family therapist or mediator. Their self-formation was built on service, not freedom. And that is what made them feel safe wearing the adult mask, because only then did the world give them a reason to exist. To survive in a world where personal needs were denied, the mind of the prematurely aged child developed an extremely sophisticated defense system. That is the relentless overthinking. It is not intelligence. It is anxiety packaged in the guise of meticulous preparation. You don't overthink because you want to solve problems. You overthink because you are trying to stay ahead of every possible negative scenario, to never be surprised or lose control. This is self-presentational pressure, pushed to its peak, where you must constantly perform a flawless version of yourself. These individuals live like rooms with many doors, but no one is allowed to step inside. They appear open, yet inside there is absolute withdrawal. You might see them as the overgivers, always the first to help, always the last to leave. But that giving is an unconscious tool of control. Because if you give enough, you feel valuable, and more importantly, you don't have to confront the void within. They are wearing the mask of perfection, a heavy mask that they believe will cause them to vanish if removed. Their nervous system is perpetually on high alert, ready to react. They were not born to be a performance. They were forced to become one. When the prematurely aged child steps into adulthood, they carry an invisible suitcase filled with unrealistic expectations and a profound fear of failure. In their careers, you become the person who is never satisfied with recognition. Even when you achieve everything, it's not joy. It's just confirmation that you are still useful. This relentless drive is not ambition. It is the fear of being replaced. You become the person who constantly needs to prove your worth again and again, because the core belief is deeply embedded that your value is conditional. In love and relationships, you become the one who maintains an invisible distance. You may be the overgiver, yet you are also the hardest person to receive from. You don't trust help. You don't believe that love can come without a price tag attached. And when someone gets too close, touching the boundary of vulnerability, you withdraw. They stretch their pain into silences. They fear intimacy because intimacy means being seen, and being seen means being vulnerable, which they learned was forbidden. They live with a philosophy of solitude. I must build my own world because no one else can do it. Their maturity is a burden, not a liberation. This forced maturity is not just a lifestyle, it is a relentless neurological state. It creates a seemingly unbreakable loop that leaves you exhausted. You work, you achieve success, you feel your worth temporarily validated. You receive dopamine from the praise, from the recognition. But that feeling doesn't last. It fades as quickly as the morning mist. And so, you run again. You must seek the next achievement, the next responsibility, to fill the void learned in childhood. You are not enough if you are not doing something. This is the toxic dopamine validation loop, a relentless spiral of self-proof. You live like someone running on a treadmill. Their rhythm is always, they complete a task. They sigh. They see the next task that must be done. They rush into it. There is no rest. There is no empty chair reserved for unconditional relaxation. Their room may be tidy, but their mind is a battlefield. They are not overtly sad. They are exhausted. They don't feel lonely. They feel empty after every victory, because that victory never heals the old wound. The external light of recognition can never fill the darkness of internal emotional rejection. Beyond the relentless cycle of exhaustion, what we need to acknowledge are the rejected and deeply buried emotions beneath the mature facade. Beneath the mask of fine is a mask, there is not peace. There is a deep pit containing anger that was never allowed to surface, shame for having needed love, and grief that was never permitted to be wept. When you grow up too fast, you don't have time to process your emotions. You package them up and toss them into a dark room in your mind. But those emotions do not disappear. They become the uninvited guest, an internal monster, the monster within, that dictates your behavior from behind the scenes. This buried anger does not manifest as shouting. It manifests as passive aggression. It manifests as harsh criticism directed at yourself or at those closest to you, the ones who dare to love you unconditionally. They live in a perpetual duality. They want the light to see them, yet they are terrified of being seen by their own shadow. They fear that if they allow themselves to feel the anger or the sadness, they will completely collapse. This is not silence. This is the control of a mouth that desperately wants to scream. This survival mechanism works so intensely that you may not even realize you are trapped. Therefore, the first step to escaping this forced maturity is to recognize the subtle red flags that your body and mind are sending you. Listen to these signals, for they are the echoes of the inner child crying out for help. You start feeling unexplained irritability when others show weakness, because their weakness threatens your core belief that you must always be strong. You find yourself unable to accept compliments easily. Instead of saying thank you, you often respond by downplaying your achievement or mentioning things you failed at. That is self-presentational pressure, pushing you to perform false humility, a way to shield yourself from disappointment if the world suddenly withdraws its recognition. More importantly, you start finding yourself unable to truly enjoy moments of rest. When you have free time, instead of relaxing, you feel anxious. You feel guilty for not doing something useful. This is toxic psychological ownership. You feel you own other people's problems and need to fix them. You might be someone with highly sensitive mirror neurons. You deeply feel the pain of others, but you cannot treat your own pain with the same kindness. You are not weak. You are just tired for too long. Reframe the narrative. Your exhaustion is not a moral failing. It is proof of the extraordinary resilience you have shown while fighting this silent battle for all these years. The liberation does not come from trying to become stronger. It comes from allowing yourself to be vulnerable safely. This is when we must return to the abandoned inner child, the child who was forced to grow up too fast. Imagine you are opening the door to the dark room in your mind, where you locked away rejected emotions and denied needs. That is the room we mentioned in Part Dam. As the first sunlight streams into that dark room, you do not need to clean it up immediately. The first thing you must do is witnessing. Stand there and acknowledge the pain, the anger, and the fear of that child, not with judgment, but with absolute self-compassion. Say to that child what no one ever said to you: it's okay. You don't have to handle everything yourself. This is not narcissism. This is the re-establishment of safety. Start with the simple grounding technique. Feel your feet touch the floor. Breathe slowly. Recognize that right now you are safe. Safety is not an achievement you have to earn. It is a state you can choose. You are allowing yourself to rest. You are allowing your body to feel a new rhythm of breath that is not the shallow, vigilant breath of hypervigilance. The inner child doesn't need you to be a hero. It just needs you to be a friend. You were not born to be a performance. You were born to be human. Allow yourself to feel simple joy, unconditional joy, the joy you refused in exchange for responsibility. The process of healing is not about trying to fix the child who grew up too fast, because you are not a broken machine. The process of healing is about integrating that child into your current adult self. This is the truth you need to face. Your pain and exhaustion are not things to be erased. They are evidence of your resilience. They are the countless wounds no one sees that allowed you to survive. Accept the truth that you will never completely get rid of those survival skills, but you will learn how to modulate them. Your capacity for hypervigilance is no longer a curse. It becomes a profound sensitivity and subtle intuition, a tool that can be switched on and off. Your capacity for parentification that made you overgive is no longer toxic sacrifice. It becomes the mature ability to care for and love others but only after you have cared for yourself. This is where we use the duality frame. This is not apathy. These are countless wounds no one sees. This is not weakness. This is fear in disguise. Your task is to learn to live with this duality, not trying to be a different person, but allowing all versions of yourself to coexist: the abandoned child, the overly responsible adult, and the person seeking peace. You are not fixing the wound, but integrating it. The emotional truth is, you can still be a responsible adult, but you have the right to break down and cry in your own safety. You have the right to ask for help without feeling guilty or weak. That is the true definition of self-control. Not the ability to control everything, but the ability to accept what you cannot control. We began with the paradox of the child who had to grow up too fast, the child who chose to disappear in a noisy world. Now, let's look at the truth from an entirely new perspective. Silence is not absence. It is the place where you listen to yourself again. Forced maturity took your childhood, but it gifted you something no one else has, a depth and understanding that others spend decades trying to find. You are not broken. You are not a project that needs fixing. You are not broken. You are becoming. You are not trying to go back to being a child. You are trying to become an adult who allows that child to finally rest. Your exhaustion is not a sign of weakness, but a sign that you have endured for too long alone. Take a deep breath. Relax your shoulders. Allow the lightness in. The mask has been too heavy. Let it fall. The profound truth is, it's not that you don't want to be seen, you just want to be understood. And understanding begins with yourself, in your own quiet acceptance. Let this silence be your new companion. It is the place where you can disconnect from the external noise and reconnect with your true essence, because in the end, we were not born to be a performance. We were born to be human. And your true self is enough. You don't need to do anything more. Just breathe. Just exist. They watch more. They think longer. They feel deeper. And they disappear quietly. But now, they have learned how to come back to themselves,